There you go.
There we go. Hi, I'm Bonnie Barker with BonnieBabeCrochet.com, and today I get to introduce you to one of my dearest friends on earth, Vicki. And thank you for coming, Vicki.
Absolutely.
And we are just going to talk about yarn. Get a lot of questions about different kinds of yarn, and I know if you ever go to Michael's or the big box stores or even to a boutique, it can be incredibly confusing, especially if you're a brand new crocheter. And you just see all this yarn and it's different thicknesses, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do I need? What do I do? Well, I hope we can answer some of those questions. This is not going to be encyclopedic and totally comprehensive. If you have any questions after this, feel free to look down in the description below and you can post your questions and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started.
So first we want to figure out what is a fiber yarn. What is yarn?
What is it made of?
Yeah.
Or actually, I tell you what. Why don't we talk about the thicknesses and then talk about that's okay. Okay. Well, I don't have a scan of the Super Saver yarn, but many of you are familiar with Red Heart Super Saver. Caron makes their version of it in the 1 pounder. I mean, that's really great stuff. Here's some other Red Heart yarn. Again, none of this is paid endorsement in any way. This is just stuff that I have in my stash, and I've got, trust me, I've got tons more. But anyway, so I'm going to start out with talking about the numbers. Okay, there's numbers on the scans in the U.S. They may not have them on some of the imported or the more imported kind of things, but there's a system in the U.S. Where if you have a number, like for example, this Red Heart soft yarn is a 4. And the word we associate with that, and Vicki knows this well, she's a great crocheter, has done so many Afghans with things like this. It's worsted weight. So number 4 is worsted weight, and that's generally what I start beginners with a nice, I can find nice good size hook, like a J or a K even, something that's going to get big fast, and a 4 worsted weight works for that. Okay, I'm going to go up in size.
Okay, so that's a 4.
That's a 4. Okay.
So
now
that's 5.
This is a 5. This is a new yarn. I'm actually getting ready to start a crochet along in the weeks to follow using this yarn. It's a 5, so it's definitely thicker. The technical word is bulky, and you can see there's a number 5 on this yarn, and so that's what that would be. Now after the 5, what comes next? Well, here's some by Bernat. Maybe you've seen this. People call it blanket yarn, and this is a number 6. And I am going to have a crochet along in the distant future using some of this as well, but it's not going to be anytime soon, but it is coming. This is really, really thick yarn, and you're going to be, wanting to use, a much larger crochet hook on this.
Which is
I'm not even sure. This is an M.
Okay.
But you want to. That's the other thing is a lot of times on the yarn, it'll tell you their recommended size hook, and this one says US. What does that say? L or 11. Okay, my glasses are over there, so I need some help. Thank you, ma'am. Just in case, so I can read the next label. So this recommends a size L, which would be something like this. And I know I'm yakking a lot.
No, that's good. No, that's good. That's what I need to know.
Yeah, the thing I'll talk about this just briefly, and that is I don't always stick to the recommended size hook, because sometimes I don't want the fabric to be real tight, so sometimes I actually bump it up a little bit bigger, and it gives a little drape to the fabric.
And more space between each stitch.
Yeah, definitely more space.
With
and it gets bigger. Yeah.
And
it gets bigger faster, and we all like that. So,
so here, this is a 5 as well, but this has got a different texture to that.
Yeah. Okay. This is the Homespun by Lion Brand. I've enjoyed using this a lot, and it's much more wavy. And the feedback I get from this yarn from people is you either love it or hate it. And I think a lot of people don't love it because they try to do more traditional crochet where you're actually working into the top 2 loops. Okay. And if you're trying to do that with and I'm not just picking on this yarn, I do enjoy this yarn, but any kind of yarn that's super fuzzy or different or very highly textured, if you're just trying to do regular crochet with it, it's going to be hard. But if you do a project like I use for this, and I do have a video coming again in the distant future using this very yarn, if you use front post and back post stitches with it, and you're working into large holes instead of just going through the top loops, you fall in love with this stuff.
So bigger stitches.
Bigger stitches where you're actually working around the stitch like in a post stitch instead of going through the tops. That will make you fall in love with the kind of textured yarns and everything. So
if you want to go smaller, do any of these go smaller?
Actually, this one does.
Okay.
Okay. This is Berroco's Vintage DK. I've actually got this for some designs in my first book, and actually second book, sorry. And this is a nice blend. It's 50% wool, I believe. Let me double check. Okay, it's 52% acrylic, 40% wool, and 8% nylon. But it makes for a very nice sweater. And let me show you something, for example, that you could use something like this. This is actually a different yarn, but this is a DK weight yarn, and this is a sweater that I've made with it, well, actually with different DK weight yarn. This is actually an acrylic, actually it's alpaca wool blend, but you can see even with crochet it makes a fabric that's thin enough to actually wear as a very wearable sweater. Okay, so that's where the thinner yarns, yeah. Yep, thank you. It's a little cold here today.
Yeah. So no, that lays nicely.
Yeah. So it's when you go to the thinner yarns, you can actually make crochet garments and things that are very wearable. Let's see what else we have. We have these. This is also by the company Berroco, and Berroco's yarn is often found in like the boutiques and yarn stores, not necessarily the Michaels and the AC Moore and Hobby Lobbies, but you know, you have to go to the smaller stores for some of these, or a lot of times they have online stores. But I always encourage people, if you can, go to your local boutiques, you know, when you can. I know we can't afford to buy everything there, but it's just kind of it's kind of nice to support what they're doing, because they offer some amazing alternatives to the other acrylics. This is actually 60% Pima cotton and 40% modal rayon. Both of those are natural fibers made from plant and very nice and soft. This has a great sheen to it.
And what number is this? Would it be?
This would be, okay, very good. There is a tiny little 3. I know you probably can't see it. There's a tiny little 3 there. Okay. So this is a DK weight, and these fibers are great for summer, spring. They're very breathable.
And what size hook would you use for that?
Okay, let's see. The recommended size hook is a size D hook. But depending on the garment, I don't do a lot with the D hook. I like to up the size of the hook. I would go up to a G.
Okay. F
or a G. And get a lot of nice. This will be fantastic drape with this.
Okay, so what you need to describe, what is a DK?
DK, very good. You know, I didn't know what that meant until like last year. So I say that, some of you may laugh at that, but it actually means double knitting, and it's just a word that came along, I guess, like worsted. You know? And a lot of knitters are familiar with that. I'm not a knitter. I do knit now, but I still wouldn't consider myself a knitter. I'm a beginner knitter, but I'm a crocheter for life. But yeah, it means double knitting, and it's just a name that somebody gave it somewhere along the line, and it just means.
It just means this kind of yarn, is it?
It's the thinner. This particular
kind of yarn
size,
right?
Yeah.
Or weight,
okay. Right? Okay, so I just wanted to say something about the size. It's really hard for me to show you here, but if I had a micrometer, which is a word I learned from my son, who is studying to be a machinist, and you know, he measures things to like I think even 10,000th of an inch.
Okay.
And if you had a micrometer, which I don't have, I should probably borrow his sometime, you could see the difference in the size of these different numbers that we're talking about. Okay.
Okay, but the weight and the number. So is there also a weight, and is there a count number as well? Or is this just
okay, there's this, okay, what she's talking about is here, there's a suggested gauge per stitches on what you should get. Okay. I would actually, I don't want to say disregard that. I mean, that might be very helpful if you're knitting. I mean, as far as crochet goes, I would just say go according to the crochet pattern, because that's should dictate, if you're using a pattern, that should dictate what you're doing. So anyway, let's look at some other similar weights. Now this is actually, okay, this is Cherub DK. It's a DK weight, obviously, in the name. And this is a nylon acrylic blend. And this is, you know, very nice, has a different texture. Very nice for baby blankets. And there's actually a baby blanket pattern on this channel using this yarn. It's very nice. And one thing great about the acrylic nylon blend for baby blankets is it's washable, and you're going to need that if you're making baby blankets. Absolutely. It also has a lot of drape to this. Here's some yarn that maybe you guys are familiar with. Have you ever worked with that? No. No. Cotton. Okay, this is the spool that you can buy at really big box stores like Walmart. Sometimes they have these at, you know, Michael's, Joann's, places like that. This is 100% cotton, and maybe many of you have made dishcloths out of this. Okay, so it's yeah, this is a 4, is also a worsted weight, which is the same weight as this, but yet these are very different yarns. Right, what they're made out of, and how you use them. Yeah, and also they weigh different. I don't have the stats on this, but let's say the same number of yards of this versus this, the acrylic, this cotton's going to be a lot heavier. I made the mistake, I should have brought it, but I didn't. I made the mistake years ago of making a cotton sweater with lots of texture to it. I'm not kidding, by the time this thing was finished, it must have weighed up close to 10 pounds. So when I get people calling or asking me questions on this channel and on Facebook, and they want to know, well, I have this cotton yarn, 100% cotton, that I can use for this scarf. Do you think that would be okay? And I'm like, well, if you want a 5-pound scarf, that's fine. If you want a lighter weight scarf, you know, stick to maybe the acrylics, or even better, if you can buy wool, because wool is actually very lightweight, but yet warm and breathable. Do you have any of those? Do you have any wool here? Do I have any wool here? Yeah, I do. I have some wool. This is actually some that I brought back from Australia by a company called Morris and Sons. It's kind of like a Lion brand in a way their business model is. It's a family-owned and operated store for many, many decades in Europe. I picked this up in Sydney, and this is 100%, I believe, Merino wool, and I think it's a DK weight. Yeah, it is a DK weight. But this would be nice, you know, very breathable, and really for scarves, hats, mitts. I wouldn't do Afghans out of this because it would take you forever and a day with the smaller yarn. Yeah, and also it would be very kind of pricey on a blanket, but you only have a couple needed, you know, for a hat or gloves or a scarf. You know, it's very doable. So we said with the DK, like the G size is the best for that kind of G or even H. Yeah, G or H. Yeah. Okay, here's some really thin stuff I found in my stash. Haven't done anything with it yet. This is I think it's a size 0. Oh my gosh. This is wool, but it's, you can't even, it almost looks like sewing thread. It is so thin. You see that? Yeah. So one day I'm going to use it, and just this tiny little thing here is over 880 yards. And what is that good for? You can make scarves. You can actually add this to another strand of yarn. You're familiar with doing that. You've done that a lot. Yeah. Let me show you. The only thing that I have made out of a lace weight, and this is actually a heavier lace weight than that, but here's a scarf. This has close to 1,000 yards in it, and it's just this little scarf. But very nice. This is actually some wool that I picked up from a company at a convention from South Africa. It was very nice, but it was a lace weight yarn.
Which means lace
weight is like a 1, which is very close to a 0, but this is like a 1. It's just a little bit thicker than sewing thread.
And you would use what hook with that?
I think I used an F, an E or an F with this. Again, I sized it up a little bit bigger than the recommended size. I'm a rebel when I do that. Here's another thing you can do with a thin, very thin. They call this like fingering weight or a lace weight. This is a cowl, and I believe this is called the Katrina cowl, and I actually have a video on my channel. If you just do a little Katrina cowl on the top there, you can get the free tutorial, and actually it's a free pattern from Cascade Yarns. So it's very thin, and but also very nice, very delicate, something you can add to your wardrobe. Only takes 1 scan of this particular yarn. Okay, here's something else. Okay, here's some. Yeah. Okay, here's some thicker yarn. I believe this is a 6. Can you guess what that is?
So this is.
We're trying to guess the fiber.
So I think you told me.
I did tell you. Yeah, okay, we're not going to cheat. I did tell her before. This is some baby alpaca, and I think I got it in a sale bin at one of those boutique stores, and it was a great price, so I kind of stocked up a little bit. And these are really nice for quick items like a headband. This is actually another type of alpaca about the same thickness, and these are really really fun to to wear. It's gonna mess up my hair, but wear in the winter time, something like that. If you put it over your ears and over your hair, it kind of helps to insulate. And it was 5 degrees this morning here in Gaithersburg, so we're into warmth.
Absolutely.
And if you hear a sound in the background, that's my heat running. I didn't want to turn it off and have it get down to 40 degrees and see our breath in here, so we're running that. Oh, this is some. Okay, here's something that's nice. Can you guess what that is? I don't think I told you what that is.
No, you didn't tell me what that is. I don't know what this is.
Okay, this is this is some of my favorite yarn to work with. I actually used some of this in my book, A Cable Crochet Made Easy. And if any of y'all are looking for a book, I'll just put a little plug in.
Yes,
this has 18 designs in it, and it also comes with 18 complete video tutorials. Okay. I didn't intend this to be a commercial, but anyway, I used it in this book. If you turn around, this design right here with the hat and gloves, I use this yarn. It's 100% Israeli cotton.
Oh my God.
And it's a single strand. And it's very thick, and it's incredibly soft. And it was so much fun.
So you said single strand means different than what we have here? Like instead of a twisted or...
Yeah, let's take a look at that. That's a great question, Vicki. Okay. So that's another question I get from people, let's say from the UK. They say, oh, is that 8 ply? Is that 6 ply?
Right, ply.
And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question, because a lot of yarns, let's say, where's our worsted weight? Okay, this is a worsted weight, but so is this. They're the same weight category, but this is a 1 ply, where if you take the yarn and if you untwist it, see if I can. If you untwist it, you see a lot of, I don't know if you can see this, you see a lot of these individual, tiny strands. So technically these are 4 ply, and this is a 1 ply, but it's the same size. They're both worsted weight yarns. Now here's a thick, size 5 to 6, and I can untwist this, and how many plies? There's like, how many do you see there? 2. See there, I hope you can see that. There are 2 plies here. So the 2 ply is thicker, but the 4 ply is thinner than the 2 ply. So
really depends.
It really depends on how it's manufactured.
Do they say what ply it is on a label?
Sometimes they might, but when you're buying yarn in the store, that's not so important as much as the weight category.
Okay.
And that's one more thing that we can talk about. The weight category, let's say you have a bunch of yarns that are size 4, or the worsted weight. I don't have enough to show you a clear comparison, but if I lined up a bunch of 4 yarns all along in a line, they would be different. It's just like if I lined up a bunch of 4-year-olds before you. Some are going to be taller, some are going to be shorter. You know, some are going to be thin, some are going to be not so thin. So, I mean, they're not, but they would all be, let's say, 4-year-olds. Well, these would all be 4 plies, but yet they're different. Okay, so for example, this is a 4 ply too. And this is, I can show you this at least. These look different, okay?
And they feel different.
And they're going to feel different, and they're going to crochet up different, which is why when you're substituting yarns for projects, it's always good to stick with what is suggested in the patterns if you want the exact or very close to the results of the design in the book or the pattern in the magazine or whatever. It's okay to substitute, and once you like that, you substitute all the time. I mean, you know how to do that real well.
Well, you have to go by the gauge, right?
Right.
The gauge, and so yeah, the question would be if you have, so you can't just do an Afghan or a scarf or something and have them all say 4, because they could be totally different if it's like this and like this and like this. Right. So you wouldn't be able to interchange. Just because it says 4, you don't interchange. You have to look at the material that it's made out of.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's a good point too. If you're substituting, let's say if you're mixing a bunch of different yarns, you wouldn't want to mix an acrylic with some wool.
Right.
Because if you do that and it's not washable wool, that wool is going to shrink up and the acrylic will not.
Right.
And if you use, let's say, cotton is wonderful for certain cottony things, like summery projects, maybe for spa cloths or dish cloths or whatever. But this yarn does different things with wear than what this does.
Right.
Acrylic tends to stay about the same. Cotton tends to stretch out over time and doesn't bounce back. Wool has enough tightness usually where you can be stretched and it bounces back.
Right.
But if it's not washable and you put it accidentally in your clothes on warm or hot water, and if it gets put in the dryer, then it's all over. I mean, if it fit you, it's probably going to fit your daughter's Barbie doll at this point. So,
okay, got
be careful with that, or maybe the toddler or somebody. You know, it won't fit mom anymore.
All right. So are these different kinds also of material? So this would be cotton, yes?
Yes. This is a thicker thread. Now, I am not a person who crochets with a lot of thread. I've done it some, but I have other friends of mine who are fantastic at working with this stuff. Most of the time, this is 100% cotton, and it comes in different sizes too, like a 1, 2, 3, 4. They have their own numbering system, and their hooks. Of course, the hooks that are used for this are much smaller than the hooks that we use for yarn. They often are steel hooks, and they have a completely different numbering system, and they're very, very tiny. Wow. This is what maybe your grandmother, I know did your family ever crochet with this? Or like doilies and things like that? Oh, wow. I mean, my grandmother, she never taught me anything about crochet, but I do remember her seeing her crochet like on the edges of pillowcases. Yeah, pillowcases. My husband's grandmother was a fabulous crocheter.
Wow, cool.
And she had a huge heart for everybody, including me. And she used to make doilies, she used to make window coverings and things out of thread. And
that's amazing.
She was amazing.
That was intricate. So this is what kind of thread?
Okay, this is actually a 2 yarn. It's an acrylic cotton blend, and I've made some really fun scarves out of this kind of yarn. This is yarn that you can buy in the big box stores like Michael's and AC Moore, Hobby Lobby, Joann's, and wherever else. I guess if you're in Australia, I don't think Morris and Sons carries this stuff. This is more for bigger stores than that. But yeah, it's really nice for summery kind of things. If you want to make a top or a lightweight sweater.
So because this has got cotton and acrylic, this is okay to use for clothing.
For garments. Yeah, I would go with, this would be probably much better for garments. If you make something like out of 100%, and I'm not saying you can't do this, but if you use like 100% cotton, over time the weight of what you've done is going to stretch out further, further, further. So you just have to be aware.
So if it's a combination of different material, so this is acrylic and cotton, so that it will keep its shape.
It'll do better.
It'll do a lot better. So the combination with cotton would be better than just having cotton by itself.
Right, and it's depending on what you're using it for. But the other thing that's nice about this is because it's half acrylic, is the weight is automatically lighter than if it was 100%. Yeah. Well, that's about it for now. I know we only just kind of opened a can of worms, and there's so many questions probably that you have more than answers for this. So if you have any questions, or even tell us what you want to know, and I'll try to maybe address that in a future video. And we'll try to find the answer if we don't know the answer, because there's a lot about yarn that I am just learning right alongside everybody else.
And you've been doing this for?
I have, actually, that's a good question. Most of my life I have been using big box store yarn, 100% acrylic. I mean, that's all that was available to me up until about maybe 10 years ago. And that's when actually that's not true. I did make a wool Afghan many years ago. And let me say something about that. I made I thought it was nice, a nice Afghan for my husband when we got married. And it was one of the first times I'd ever used wool. And I made it out of 100% wool. And I did think I was taking care of this, but then a few years later, I unpacked. This is when we were moving from place to place as a young couple, and I unpacked it, and somewhere along the line, moths got into it and absolutely destroyed it.
Oh no.
And so I remember paying a lot of money for that yarn, but it was beyond repair in any way, shape, or form. So I actually had to throw it away.
No.
The yarn was just not usable at all. But before then, you know, all I had used was acrylic. So I still have the very first Afghan I made when I was 7 to 9 years old. And it looks old, it's worn, but I still have it, and it's in excellent condition.
And you used acrylic.
And I used 100% acrylic, you know, the cheap stuff that some people tend to complain about once they've gotten in touch with some of these finer fabrics. But I just want you to know that there's nothing wrong with that stuff. That stuff is fabulous. If you're looking for an Afghan, I wouldn't recommend going to anything else. Because it will last. It will outlast. And all that to say, too, concerning these finer fibers, don't want to discourage you from using them at all, but if you do use them, make sure they're well protected. Make sure that you do care for them. Put them in a cedar chest when you're not wearing them. Don't leave them out where you have a lot of moths flying in and out. And there's also something called a carpet beetle, and I'm sure there are many other things that you need to look out for with fine garments, but I know carpet beetles are perfectly harmless, and they're just about everywhere. And they like to eat cashmere, wool, and all this other stuff. So if you take out your, let's say, a wool garment, and you find a little hole here and there, it's probably because somebody had a little snack on it. So I would recommend you protect it as best you can. Put it in a cedar chest, or maybe in a in a box somehow. You want to be careful of that too. That it's sort of an acid-free environment. But I don't want to get into archival stuff in this video. But you do, all that to say is, if you make something with some of the finer fibers, you do need to think a little more carefully about protecting it than you would, let's say, the acrylics. Okay, I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, so anyway, if you have questions, just, again, post them down there below. And if there's more you want to learn about, I can go try to learn about it and bring it to you. And anyway, we'll give that a try.
Yep.
Well, Vicki, thanks for coming talk with us. I feel like I did all the talking.
Absolutely.
Anyway, anyway, well, just say God bless, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.